everyone. There we go. Hey everyone, how's it going today? Thanks for joining me. Going to be talking a little bit about digital effects, or actually digital modeling. So let's check it out. I'm going to play a little bit. See what's going on. All right. Run the track. All right. How's everybody doing? All right, that was fun. Someone was saying Philip was saying a little echoey. Let me know there's an echo going on there. Should not be, but all right, let me know. Okay, that was some Michael Schenker, actually. The Michael Schenker chord progression, a song called I Want More. Big fan, so I just thought that would be kind of fun. And the reason why I chose this today was because I am using my Fractal FM3, and I want to just talk about all this stuff right now. Now, people often ask me, hey, Jeff, let me go back to the other one. You've got these great amps, which I do. I have some of the most spectacular amps on the planet. And when I picked up the FM3 or prior to that, using all sorts of digital modeling gear, for a bunch of reasons. One, let's just talk about really frankly. All this stuff is really, really, really expensive. And that makes it, difficult for anybody to purchase. Of course, I understand that. And then the reality of, I live in New York City, so how much can I use these amplifiers to any kind of degree to where they do anything remotely what they're designed to do? And the answer to that is 0. Right? I can never do that at home. Now on gigs, sure, I can crank up my amp, hopefully. Well, not even, because most of the people, if you know New York, the gigging situation, it's not low volume, but it's certainly not like I can't use my 100-watt amp behind me or anything like that. So how do we work around this? And how do I work around stuff at home and when I do demos or when I do things at TrueFire? A lot of the TrueFire stuff is not a real amplifier. So let's just talk about through all this stuff too. Let's talk about the aux. I don't have the aux plugged in right now. The aux is a spectacularly great piece of gear. And people ask me, well, do you prefer the aux and your amplifiers, or do you prefer, the FM3 or something like that? I like both a lot, and they both have different pluses and minuses. So for me, the aux, one thing that people kind of forget, the aux is digital modeling. People are like, oh, isn't your real amp and the aux better? And I'm like, well, the aux is a fake representation of a speaker cabinet and reverb and things like that. So is there a difference really? Well, maybe because you have your amp, but you still have to kind of tweak it enough to where it actually works for you and gets you the sounds that you want. All right, so that being said, I love the aux. I think it's a spectacular invention, and I think everybody, if you've got a really great tube amp and you intend upon doing a fair amount of recording, I think it's a great investment. Okay, so, but for the most part, I will play through my amps all the time at home, but at a fairly low volume because, like I said, I live in New York and my neighbors probably already hate me already. But for the most part, I play through digital modeling. So like I said, I have the FM3 by Fractal, and I guess I should say, this is a paid endorsement, but they're not paying me to say this. They gave me one at an artist discount because I really like it and I wanted to use it, and I intend upon incorporating it into some of the courses and things. But prior to this, I've been using for a long time the Apollo, the Universal Audio plugins, which are spectacular. The plugins in GarageBand are really good if you want to go lower cost. The plugins in Logic are great. So, and S-Gear is one of my favorites. S-Gear by Scuffum Amps, I should put a link to that. I think that is a spectacular plugin that works on any platform, and it runs solo, so I can just use it on my desktop. And that's like $130 or something like that. So if you're staying at home, and there's all sorts of, there's bias, there's tons of them. There's so many of these plugins that are great, and I highly recommend them. Okay, so the one I'm using right now, and the reason why I want to talk about it, is the Fractal FM3, which I think is a really spectacularly good unit. It's the favorite one I've come across. And what I like about the unit is it's as realistic as I've come across in any situation. I've played through the Kemper, and I really think the Kemper is great. The Line 6 stuff is great. So all of them, you have to think about what's in your budget and what your plans are to do with it. The thing that always kind of got me about a lot of these units was the feel of them. A lot of times they sounded pretty good, but they didn't feel really good. You're playing and you're like, that doesn't really feel like an amp. And that sometimes is the problem. Now, I'll address a few more things and I'll start showing you how this works and how I think about this and why I think these are great tools for every musician to have, is, on a gigging situation, I look at these units as, like I said, a tool. If I'm going to go do a gig, like I did last night at the Bitter End, I bring a real amp because that's the way I like to hear music. I like the sound of a tube amp. That's the way I started playing, and I can't foresee myself replacing real amps at any point in time for me in a live gigging situation in my band, or when I play with Robin or something like that. I can't imagine going up on stage, he's playing a dumble and I'm plugging in a fractal or something like that. Not that they don't sound great, it's just, I think for me that's not the right tool for that gig, right? For that job, it's not the right tool. So I like being able to walk over to my amp and turning it up and then hearing it on stage and all those things. So, but that being said, if I were in, like my good friend Angus Clark, who's in the Trans-Siberian Orchestra, they use the fractal stuff on stage. Metallica uses fractals. U2, a whole backup line, maybe their real setup, is using fractals. Let's just say if Roger Waters decided to give me a call, which I would love he would do, would I use real amps or a fractal? I would consider using something like a fractal because all the sounds are in there. They're on banks, they're saved, you can hear them through every night. Probably almost everything is through in-ears anyway. So let's talk about that. If you're playing through in-ear monitors, like a lot of people do church gigs, and the digital modeling world is really, really big, that's because you hear everything in your in-ears and there's no stage volume. So, either you have your amp at super low volumes or it's in another room and you're not really interacting with your amplifier anyway. So at that point in my life, I'd say, well, why don't I just use something like this, which makes things easier for the sound guy, easier for everyone. When you say to someone, oh, Angus is on the chat, maybe he can chime in. So Angus could definitely chime in on this. So, the sound guy will like you much better than toting around all those amps. And then there's the variables of amplifier. So like I said, I think that it's a tool for the right gig at the right time. All right. So for a live blues gig interacting with people, I don't think that that's the choice I'm going to make. You guys will laugh. It's really funny. I should always remember to do this. I hit this big clam in the intro thing because my phone rang and I had the phone here and it was, one of those scam calls and it was like the CDC calling me. Why would the CDC be calling me? I love it. Now I just kind of got distracted and I hit that note there. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this. What I love now is I am using, you get all these different amp sounds out of the unit. So right now, let me just go back to my favorite, and this is the Axe Effects, and I really like the way they have this all set up. I think it's really, really cool. It just looks like an amp guitar rig. So you have your input, look at that, your cable, and then you're going to connect all your pedals in a row with your effects. So for instance, my amp here, I'm going to go to my little preset of my own here. This is the one you guys hear me use all the time. Sorry, I'm in the wrong thing here. Yeah, this is what I use all the time on the show. Got a little more reverb and delay in there than I usually do because of playing with that track. Let me just kind of tweak that. All right, so so that's not real, and people are always like, "Oh man, what amp you're playing through?" So what I like about any modeler, any good modeling amp will give you a representation of what the amplifier is. Now, I'm going to talk about the fractal stuff because I do like it and it's been my favorite. Is that here are the actual, settings of the amplifier. So we have this thing called Authentic, which really lines up the sounds of my amp. So what I like when it's a really nicely done representation of the amp, it will react like the amp. So what Fractal does, which is pretty cool, they digitally recreate the circuitry of the amplifier. So it's actually like they're recreating the whole amplifier using copies of the digital circuitry. So like in a real JTM 45, you turn your bass up all the way. Everything gets kind of tubby. So I want to react to it like it's a real amplifier. So I'm going to bring that down. Right? So I can dial in the amp the way I would normally dial it. Now, the interesting thing, where these things get really really complicated. And this is where I want to talk to you guys about option anxiety. Because if we look back on this fractal thing, here are all my amplifier choices, which is crazy, right? Look at that. So that's nuts, but awesome because you have all these choices. So what I try to do is, what do I use in the real world for the most part? Now, you guys know I use the True Rocks a lot. They don't have a True Rock in here that is the ones I like. That's, for me, I'll be honest, that's the one lacking thing. I haven't found the True Rock to sound like my True Rock. But having Marshalls, and have played Marshalls my whole life, I found things that sound really, really good, or better than I can do in my house. Like, I can't mic my amplifier and have it play at the volume I want to, my super lead. So I'm going to use this, and what I'm going to do is recreate that sound. So what I would recommend to you is you try out an amp that you own, or an amp that you like, right? Don't, oh wow, I've got a Friedman, or I've got all these boutique amps. Just go with something simple to figure out how you work through the amplifier. So if I choose this JTM45, which I'm familiar with, I'm going to do that. Also, now what we also can choose in a lot of these things, is IRs, which are called impulse responses. Let me explain all these, what an impulse response is. An impulse, think of a speaker, right, a guitar speaker, as an EQ. Obviously, it makes everything louder, but the speakers work the same. They're like EQs. Now, they can handle wattage and all these things like that, but one of the biggest changes you can make to the sound of your amplifier, if you're not really crazy about an amp, is to change out your speaker. Now, I know Angus is online, and he's got a deluxe that he put what'd you put in there, Angus? Greenback? Something like that? So there's so many speakers that you can change in your amplifier. So the True Rock, I like the ones that they have. I really like their choice. In Marshalls, I either like G12Hs, right? The G12Ms, they're the greenback speakers, the G12M, or G12H, or G1265. So, you're going to be like, what? The Clapton speaker, the Hendrix speaker, and then the ones that they used during the 70s. So the greenback is the one if you really want to get a traditional Marshall sound. So I know that because I just know enough of this nerdy stuff. So the first thing I do when I go into some of these programs like this is I'll go, okay, here's my Marshall. I've got my Marshall amp, and I'm going to choose a cabinet here, and this says 412 basket weave. I just happen to know, you got to know some of this lingo, and that's where it gets kind of annoying. Something that maybe says greenback, but a basket weave cabinet is a 412, a Marshall. Basket weave referred to the grill cloth on a Marshall in the 60s. And so that I know, because I've been around the block, this is a Marshall greenback cabinet. Right now, if I were to just change, let me just show you guys something. I'm just going to grab a totally different cabinet here. I'm going to choose this, whatever it is. Right? It sounds completely different because of the miking of the cabinet, the speaker, all sorts of things. So we can just choose pre-roll a 75. There's another Marshall kind of cabinet. Right? So I'm going to go with stuff that I find to be familiar. So I'm going to go back to that cabinet, which I know is the 103. I've just been... Right? So I'm going to stick with that because I know it's a cabinet that I like. So as I said, the option anxiety can make you crazy. So one thing that I did, and I think one thing that's really great about a lot of these companies, I feel Line 6 sometimes gets a little carried away with the effects, right? When you go into the store, like you plug in the Helix, which is a great piece of gear, and then you plug in the first channel and there's the first effect, and it's like all this reverbs and delays, and you're like, who would use that? So I like companies that Fractal has done, and Kemper, and Line 6 too. They just kind of do these basic amp sounds. And for me, then I just build upon them. So let's take a look what they've done, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. All right, so here's a 50-watt plexi. Let's take a listen to this. right? So for me, that's pretty good. It's pretty Marshall-y. So I can go in, and the first thing I can do is tweak the way I think it sounds, right? And then we have these different cabinets that I can choose from. If you look, they say something like Brit 70 GB, which is, greenback, Brit 70s. So you want to start to kind of think about that. Marshall cabinets usually go through the Brit cabinets, and that helps you instantly sort of get into a sound. So what I like that they've done, and I put a link, if you do have the FM3, a good friend of mine, Buddy Gill, designed a lot of patches. He goes by Austin Buddy, and I did a whole live pack, and he's a friend of mine, but what also happened was he sent me this pack, and it really helped me understand how this whole modeling stuff works, how the order of everything goes. And I think his pack is like something like $100 maybe, like the price of a kind of inexpensive pedal. I really got into understanding and taking his ideas and then starting to make them my own. So I highly recommend what he's done. So you start to you go through these things, and let me see if I can find something like, okay, let's try a Friedman, Brown Eye. Right, so I'm going to dial. I'm going to look at the cabinet, and I bet, there you go, greenback, right? You see, so V30, if you look here. So common Celestion style cabinets. Celestians are usually teamed up, with Marshall or British style amplifiers like a Marshall or a Friedman. Very often, or Bogner, you're going to use Celestions, V30s, which are vintage 30s, classic lead 80s, things like that. So that makes life much easier when you're trying to design your own sounds if you get a little background information. And I said, a lot of these cabinets and a lot of these companies, they'll pre-make the amplifier for you. So if I call up, say, something like a Princeton Reverb, let me see if I can find that. There we go, Prince Tone. See, they know all these names like that. And then I can go through different variations that they've done. So when I'm recording, all the effects you're hearing are from this, and I'll talk about effects in a second. Spring reverb. Now, obviously, it doesn't sound like I'm doing a pitch on the FM3. And I am, because I actually really think it's the best unit I've come across for this. But in favor of digital modeling, I don't own all those amps. I can't mic all those amps. I don't own all those speaker cabinets. So when I'm recording on my own music, or sometimes people want me to record stuff for them, I just recently played on a record for a guy named Steve Levine, and I used the Fractal and didn't say anything and sent it, and they were like, wow, those are some great guitar sounds. What were you using? And it was all the Fractal, and they couldn't believe it, because oftentimes people will listen with their eyes. I could have told them, well, I mic'd a deluxe reverb and used that tremolo, which I don't own one. So that's, to my mind, that's what that song kind of called for, was a deluxe reverb with a tremolo. So I just created it, or used one of these presets and tweaked it to my own to help me get that sound. So when I look once back again on gigging, I get the different sounds from pedals. And when I'm playing through the amp, my amplifier, I know how to work, how to run basically clean tone. I kind of go for just my sound live, but when I'm at home, to get this cranked Marshall sound, how can I get that at home? I would have to crank my super lead into an aux running that amp at, really high volumes, which gets a certain great sound. Or I can do something that to me sounds very, very similar, especially in a recording context. Now, there are going to be differences. I mean, if somebody said to me, hey man, you can go into the Power Station, if it's still around, great studio in New York, and record all your amps with a microphone in front of it with all the best preamps and a Neve mixing board and all that. Yeah, I'm always gonna do that, of course. But that doesn't really exist anymore. So what's happened, I really feel like, is companies like Fractal, Kemper, Line 6, at this level, the things have gotten so high that they're virtually indistinguishable, especially in recordings. And if you're a little lower budget, because who can afford all that stuff, who has that opportunity to do that? And there's also the learning curve on all these things. So it is very funny. I find it funny when they're really surprised to learn that I use a lot of digital modeling gear, and I have forever. They just make life easier. And once you learn how to use them, I even used to use the old pod bean, and I thought I got some pretty good sounds out of it. All the early TrueFire courses were all the pod. And people are like, is that a Dumble you're using on that? And I'm like, no, it's a pod 2.0, you know. So it's how you work it. So let me just talk about one of the things that I really like about these units. And Line 6 is great with this as well. They have these great visual representations on the unit itself, and they also have them on these desktop things. So I can start to mess around. Let me go back to my preset that I like, Jeff45. So Jeff means Jeff, GTM45, and here I have an overdrive in the front. Once again, I think I saved that with a lot of reverb on it, which I would not normally play with that much reverb. So, there we go. All right, so I'm going to turn off my delay. And what I like about these units especially is that you can, what it's done in the real world is if I want to buy a pedal, I can try them out and see what I like virtually. So for instance, I like delay afterwards. And if you look here, we have a stereo tape delay. We have, what's the other one I really like? Where is it? Where is it? Yeah, Memory Man. So it's going to be Stereo Mind Guy. Right? So I can start to just, experiment with the pedals the way I like them. Same thing with the reverb. I can just dial it in. So the point of this today was to say, this stuff sounds great, especially if you know what you're looking for. It's so easy to get completely overwhelmed when you go into these things and go, oh my God, I can use all these patches. I get overwhelmed. Look at all these presets and completely overwhelmed. And some of them just don't sound good to me, or the way I play guitar. And here's something I want to discuss that's really kind of cool that I didn't really think about much. Until you start recording, or you start listening to me when I started listening to Jimmy Page, sometimes a very small guitar sound, say like a 110-inch speaker, can sound really great in the mix. So something that is EQ'd differently, some sound that I would not normally use, can often sound really great if I just dial it in. So sometimes what I'm getting at is I'm just playing and I'm like, oh, let me just try this champ. In the real world, I don't really love the sound of a champ in my house or on a gig, but in the recording, it might fill up this little mid-range spot. And then I have all these different amps that I can multi-track with and mess around with. Now the other fun stuff, let me just change guitars. And this is really the stuff that I totally love, is that people make presets or you can make your own. And if I want to let's see if we can get some of this in here. All right, it's going to dial this back in. I'm going to go in over here. I think we've got like a what's the Floyd one I'm thinking of here? Brick in the Wall. Let's see if we got that. So, yeah, another Brick in the Wall part 1 and 2. Right? Right? So you can start to dial these things in. And I love that, Here, this is one of those guys, somebody patches. Right? Yeah. So everything is in here, and if you don't own all of these pedals, it's really fun, and you save a ton of money. Now, of course, I'm a big nerd, and I do own a lot of these pedals, for sure. But if I were going to do a Pink Floyd cover band, would I want to have a whole big pedal board for me? Or maybe something like this. These are things you want to think about. But at home, if you don't have the luxury of owning all these pedals, digital modeling is certainly the way to go. And I think the level that they're at, it's been really, really great. So yes, it sounds like I'm pitching the the Fractal. It's the one I have the most experience with. Like I said, S-Gear I think is a spectacular plugin. If you're just getting into it and you have something like Logic, you get a bunch of amps with that, and just check that out. There's a million of them out there now. Bias, like I said, there's really a ton, and they're all really, really good, and they're all getting better and better. So if we can answer any questions, I know Angus is in here if you have any questions. I'm just kind of blabbing. But people, like I said, people ask me all the time. The one thing I love is like, oh, now that you got the Fractal, you're going to stop using your 2-rocks. I'm like, no. One is for one job. The other one is for the other job. To me, the two have nothing, almost like nothing to do with each other. You know, it's what kind of hammer do I need for what job? Okay. So let's see if you got any questions for me, guys. Happy to answer that. Let me say hi to everyone who's here. Yeah, Phil's back. Thanks so much, Phil, for being back. That was great. Got it back from his vacation and stuff. Well, he was back for a little while, but. All right, Phil Jones, Sam Stamos, what's up? Jason Carter. Hey, as you holding Phil, I'm holding a pair of 12AX7s as we speak. It's pretty funny. Stephen Moore, Guitar Grandpa. Everybody. I can guess all these names. So, we got any questions? Sons of Sand. Sons of Sand was at my gig last night, and he said it was a ripper. Thanks, man. It was fun. Definitely fun. People are like, do I have any video? No, maybe some people do. I think Jason Laughlin got some, so we're gonna get that. Okay. And thanks for the compliments on the beginning soloing stuff. I can talk about that in a little bit too. All right. I'm going through this. There's a lot of talking. I was trying to avoid looking at. I realized when I watch some of the videos back, I'm looking at the posts. Angus Clark, no, +1 for S-Gear. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, S-Gear is great. And Vili, yeah, you got the Helix a year ago. It's really good, but there's nothing like blasting a vintage Rivera. Yeah, there's nothing that beats that. But you know, when can you do that? That's the thing. And I can't do that at home. If I'm going to go on a gig and I can do that, yeah, I'm going to do that. All right, just running down the questions. Congrats on 15,000 subs. Thanks, man. Thanks, Graham. Appreciate it. Yeah, the FM3 is like $1,100. It's expensive, or more, but it is. It's really good. Frank Gladden, thanks for the top chat, man. Thank you so much, Frank. Appreciate it. All right, so running through the questions. Are there any questions? They're probably at the bottom. Boy. Okay, here we go. Thanks, Phil. They're at the bottom. Do you have any special tweaks when you use a preset with the Les Paul than, say, the Stratocaster? Yeah, well, what I would do, I would usually dial back some gain, right? Because the Strat, and this is one thing that was really kind of nice about my friend Buddy Gill's presets. All of his presets are set for like humbuckers and single coils, or I'd say like Strat or Les Paul. So he's actually taken that into account. And that's one thing that's really nice. So when I was playing my gig last night, I used the black Strat with humbuckers. And it's the first time I've actually used that guitar in a gig as opposed to a Stratocaster. And yeah, I had to really bring the gain down. So that would be the first thing I would do, is definitely bring the gain down so you're actually equaling the things out if that's what you want, for sure. Now, there's all sorts of crazy stuff that you could do, and there's a guy who Angus turned me on to, his friend Leon Todd, who does a lot of these videos for Fractal, and I learned a lot from him. And one of the things that he does, this is really kind of cool, and this gets super nerdy, and you don't have to get this nerdy, is I can actually, if I go into the amplifier here, you know, sometimes I might feel it's a little bright. Let me go back to my patch here because I'm most comfortable with that one. There we go. All right, so input EQ, if you look, I created this slope. I took off some of the low end of the amplifier, you know. I took that back. I bring it back, take off a little bit of that low end. It kind of tightens up the amplifier. And this is what a good recording engineer would do. He would start kind of tweaking that EQ whether you knew it or not. So really, if you look at, and one thing that's really important to think about, when you're looking at these units, they are what a mic'd amplifier sounds like if you're using it the way I am, right? It's how your amp would be mic'd and your cabinet. So it's not like, you know, you're playing it and it's not going to sound like it is in the room with you. It's going to sound like what it sounds like mic'd. And that's important to remember, right? So if I'm sitting in front of my Two-Rock or my Marshall in the room, it's going to have a very different experience than it is when it sounds like it's mic'd. But when I'm recording, you have to mic the amplifier, and that's where this stuff comes in. Okay. So yeah, I will actually just drop back some of the gain very often between those two patches, like if I'm going from a Strat to a Les Paul. Okay. Do you have any FM3 patches, presets available for purchase? Not yet. I'm going to work on that. I thought that would be kind of fun because I've been using it all the time. My favorite amp so far at this point is the JTM 45. Do you use simulators? Do you use simulators? Do these simulators, excuse me, respond to volume tweaks, sustain notes, and fade outs gradually with no cutoff effect? Yeah, absolutely. And then one thing I think you might have to really be careful of is if on some of these units, they come with a noise gate on already. So you have to be careful with the noise gate because if you're not used to one, oh, I have no sound. What did I do? I did something. Oh wait, go back to you. What did I do? I did something weird. Okay, hey, it's live. I think I turned off the input. Hold on. Yeah. See? Oh yeah, I did. I turned off the input because I'm an idiot. Okay. So if I turn a noise gate up all the way, like the note will die down. But if I have the noise gate all the way off, you're going to hear the hum of the Stratocaster, which is fine. Right? Right? So you can start to kind of dial that in so it goes away a little bit when you stop playing. See? I like a very low noise gate because I never play with one live, so I just deal with it. But yeah, watch. Yeah, I think the notes ring out just fine. I really do feel, especially with this unit, which I have the most experience with, and S-Gear, actually all of them, if you know how to dial it in right, and you've got to be careful with the noise gate. Like I said, a lot of patches, like from line 6 when you first get it, they have a heavy noise gate, and you're like, where's my note going? So check out your noise gate. Do you record in stereo or mono when I'm playing with this? It depends. Oftentimes I will record, if I want a stereo effect that this is doing really, really well, I'll try to print the effect. That makes it difficult when you do overdubs. So I try not to, you try to get through without doing an overdub on that, right? Because if you do an overdub, let me point that out. If you record an effect with reverb or delay or something, and you're recording it and you print it, in other words, you're printing it to the recording, and you want to do a punch, don't forget that you'll turn off that reverb and that delay or that chorus, and it'll sound weird. Like you'll hear it. Something weird will happen. And that's why, because the effect and the reverb are not going to line up necessarily. So that's why a lot of times when people record, they record a dry guitar part, and then they put on the effects afterwards. Now, say that recording I talked about that I had done earlier this year, I sent them no reverb because he asked me not to, but I printed the tremolo because it made me play a certain way. And then I also sent him a track with the reverb and the tremolo printed because I think it made me play better. And he ended up using that because he agreed. He's like, it just has a different vibe to it. So if you're playing with an effect on, you're going to play a certain way. And I always try to print that. So if it's a stereo effect that I want, I will print that in stereo. And plus, of course, if you're in Logic, you record the stereo tracks, and then you can make it not stereo if you want. You just make it a mono track. So I like having that option. But usually guitar tracks, I will record mono just because that I will. Unless I want this big stereo chorus spread, because the effects in this are really great. Okay. Do you still own Line 6 Pod 2.0 or your Boss Katana? I don't have the Pod 2.0. I think I gave it to a student many years ago. The Katana I don't own anymore. I had one. Those are great. The Boss Katanas are really cool. I was just doing a bunch of gigs, like these kind of, money gigs where you play as background music. And nobody cared what the guitar sounded like. And it's a nice light amp, and I could just bring it around with me. But, those gigs aren't really happening right now. And I honestly, I hated those gigs because you're just background music and nobody cared. I mean, it's okay money, but it was not fun. So my neighbor's kid's playing guitar, so I just gave it to them. Because I wasn't using it. It was sitting in the closet. So, okay. Can you still use pedals with the FM3, or is there no real need? You can, of course, but I don't find that there is a real need. Unless there's something very specific that I want. Some guys talk about using up all the memory. I've never gotten close to that because I don't use a ton of effects. Because you can use up the memory. You can use up the memory on a Helix if you put on a ton of effects. On the XFX3, like the rack unit, I think there's so much memory it doesn't really seem to be a problem. But I've never encountered overusing the memory because for me, when I play, it's going to be your basic stuff. And it's pretty good. The stuff that uses the most memory is things like reverbs, because those are pretty intensive on the processing. Okay, what's the difference between a multi-effects unit and a modeling unit? That's a great question. Multi-effects unit is usually one that's meant to be run into your amplifiers. That's like having a pedal board, like all these separate pedals, but in one unit. And it does reverb, delay, chorus, and all those things in flanger. What this does is amp simulation too, and usually the multi-effects units don't do that. So the multi-effects unit is just like owning a bunch of pedals in one unit, and this is like owning your amp and pedals in one unit. Hopefully that helps. Can you share your favorite presets? I still always mess with them. It's just the JTM45, like I said. That's my favorite one so far. Yeah, I'm just kind of messing with that with JTM45, some reverb and delay. Got a Univibe. Chorus if I want to get the 80s on. Delay. And some more overdrive. Right? So, kind of just stick with that one. I will probably get around to making some packs of sounds, and upcoming videos I'm going to start doing that because I'm using it a lot for recording. But that's really it, the JTM45. And the fun thing for me with this thing is if I get 2 or 3 guitar sounds, 2 or 3 amps that I really love out of it, then it's worth it for me. I'm not really interested in having every amp in the planet because I don't have the time nor interest, right? I know Marshalls, I know Fenders, I know variants of those. So I'll just kind of tweak those and find them. Those are the amps I feel most comfortable with, so that's usually what I end up using. Just getting reviewed, what do you think of the IK multimedia project? I don't know what those are. I don't know those. How long do you have virtual pages, Jeff's and Hendrix's? Probably at some point. What's your opinion on the Maxon OD808? It's $80, too much to pay for. I don't think so. That sounds about right. I don't know. Maxon makes good stuff. The OD808 is cool if you want a tube screamer. I like that. I would like, virtual 1978 Linda Ronstadt. Funny. Okay, going down. Okay, so Phil's catching up some of the questions. Okay, I think I'm ahead. Okay, this is Ricardo. In my opinion, these modelers tend to make guitars plays the same. I mean, I can't hear enough of different types of instruments with fret. Well, this one I can. Check it out. Watch. Okay, so here. So we use basically asking, like, I don't hear, they don't show the differences of the guitars. I find that to be the case in maybe older modeling units, but here's my Strat, right? All right, so let's hear a different Strat. Dead string. Right? Definitely a difference between the two guitars. All right, so there's that. Let's hear PRS. Right? Now, I hear the difference in the guitars for sure. I mean, you heard the difference between those two Strats, the vintage one and the Tuttle. Hugely different. So I think if you're talking older versions of these things, I would agree with you. Many years ago, you'd plug them in like, meh. And what I like about what they've gotten to, especially my experiences with the Line 6 and S-Gear, is they've gotten to the point where, the FM3, not Line 6 lately, is they can do the cleaner, slightly distorted guitar sounds, those bluesier sounds that I really love, where in the past that was sort of lacking. You know what I... Right? Those sounds were really hard to get. The heavy stuff was fairly easy, but I think it does it really well now. Yeah, the FM3 it's actually it's a floor unit as opposed to the rack-mounted one, which I wanted something, I didn't want to make the big commitment on the rack thing, and I don't want to run around with a rack, The whole point of something like this was to make it portable, so if I needed to go do a gig, I can just plug this in and do it. What's your signal chain using the FM3? I'm just plugging the FM3 with the USB out right into the audio in, the optical in on my Apollo Twin Duo. The cool thing about the Fractal and many of all these at this point, they work as a sound card too. So if you have the Line 6 one, you just plug it into your computer and you're ready to rock. Same thing with the FM3. So it's really cool. I can just record that way. Yeah, I mean, there's difference. Like this is your Weston Lawless guitars. I love my FM3, but wish the ability to change parameters in a scene worked like Line 6 and the Helix. When you want to change a parameter on that snapshot, you need to turn the knob. Yeah, they came up with this performance mode that I haven't investigated yet. If you check out Leon Todd's videos, he's really gotten into great and how you can quickly do all this stuff. Like I said, all these, I think, in the face of this stuff on the units, I haven't played a Helix, but I did work for Line 6 many years ago. They were cool company. Their user interface has really always been great. It's always been super simple. So there are those trade-offs as to what you want to start to work with. Which one, what one works best for you, right? In terms of simplicity. This one's super deep, the FM3. You can get super deep, but you don't have to, which I like. All right. Right, this is Michael Cope, right? The small benefit for me that I use the FM3 as an audio interface too and run it directly into the computer. Yeah, that's a big thing. It really helps a lot. And you can run the backing tracks from the computer. It works great, absolutely. So you can play along with it. And that's what I'm really saying. So sitting at home, I can get all these sounds and play along with that backing track and go, well, okay, I want to get a Marshall. I got a Marshall sound there. So like I said, I think we're getting to the point where these things are really, really, they've gotten to a point where I defy a lot of people to tell the difference. It is a different experience playing through them. One that I cannot have at my house, right? So I cannot turn up my T-Rock and crank it. I just can't, I can't do that. So is that the best feeling in the world? Hell yeah. Playing through a loud amp, there's nothing like it. I've not played through a Axe-FX through a powered monitor. In my mind, on my gigs, that's not going to be something that's going to happen. I'm always going to end up using the real amplifier. Just because I know, well, that's what I'm comfortable with, that's what I've always done, and that's what I will continue to do. Because to me, that's not the right tool for my gig. Where this is a great tool for teaching, recording, and having fun. That's the best thing about this thing. Okay. For many years, I would play. I've always been using digital modeling, but it's not been a lot of fun. And I find the FM3 to be a lot of fun to play. And that's my I should have probably said this right off the top. Haven't tried the Helix, haven't tried the Quad Cortex, all those ones. Just tried this one, and I really enjoy playing it. Most everybody, when they hear the guitar sounds, say, oh man, your guitar sounds are really great. It's either the FM3 or sometimes it's the 2-rock through the aux. Remember that this is not real either. You know, these are fake cabinets. So, but lately I've been using the FM3 because it's not blowing to my tubes, and it's just a little easier to use. It's easier to dial in a sound than the aux is for me, honestly. And I just think it sounds great. Found a few sounds that I really love, and I feel totally comfortable playing it. So, all right. I know I sound a bit like a shill for it, this particular unit. I'm just saying I really do like this one. You want to find the one that's in your price point and something that works really well. The HX Stomp people really seem to like. A lot of people really love. I haven't heard the Quad Cortex. Enough people talk about that one. I know it's kind of popular right now, but this is the one I found, and I really like it. And like my friend, like I said, Austin Buddy, was really helpful before I got it, and we ran through it, and it's just cool. All right, so there. Hopefully, this answered some questions. A lot of people hanging out. Any more questions about these units? I mean, like I said, you don't have to go nuts. It all depends on what you are looking for. If you're getting into it, I would go, go cheap at first, like I said, something inexpensive like Eskier. If you have GarageBand or Logic, you already have it. You already have a bunch of plugins. You just get an interface. So, okay, this is a question. Have you ever tried to compare the real 2-rock amps with a simulation on the Fractal? I know there's a 2-rock. I've only, the 2-rocks I own are not in the Fractal. And the 2-rocks that are on the Fractal, I have not played. I can say that on the Fractal, because they've flat out said we don't have your amp, we've not modeled or copied, footprint, whatever they want to call it, your amp. So, no, I have not found that equivalent. But I found the equivalent that is totally satisfying enough for me for my Marshall Super Lead and a JTM 45 and a Super Reverb that as opposed to, tried to get that. I don't own those amps. I can't afford to own all those amps. I don't want to own all those amps. You get the idea. All right. Okay. You must be the only one who doesn't like playing loud playing guitar loudly. I don't really like it either. I can't, and I've got earplugs all over the place for real gigs. I'm always doing that. Okay. Have you done tone matching of your own amp? No, the Fractal doesn't do tone matching as opposed to the other ones because they just kind of think that that's just an EQ thing. Not saying that that's good or bad, but they don't offer tone matching on the FM3. That's like in some of those things where you play your amp and it listens to your amp, you play a signal through it and it creates the amp, So that Fractal doesn't offer that, so I haven't tried it. Some of the ones that I've heard, like Pete Thorne does those great demos, and he did some really great sounding ones with that new one with the Quad Cortex. That seemed like it was really pretty cool. CPU usage looks around 67. Does it max out your laptop at any point? No. All the CPU is from the Fractal unit itself. So my CPU unit usage on my computer is 0 from it. So this is all contained within the Unix. It's not a plugin. It's a standalone unit. And if you look, what's interesting, so I'm going to just maybe, you can start loading up. This is pretty light, what I have here, but if you look, it says 67, but what it does is these are all, they're not actually on right now, but if I put them all on, the usage doesn't change at all, right? So, Right, so oh, sorry, get that. I'm not doing this right here. Sorry, guys. There we go. Here's everything. So you notice that the CPU usage doesn't really change anywhere because when you have a pedal in the block, they call this little block here, it already acts like it's on, so you're not going to overuse the CPU usage. So look at that. I have all these things and it's still not maxed out. So it's pretty cool. I think for me, I've never run into a situation where I'm like, oh man, I wish I had more power out of the thing. I've not really needed it. Okay, so again, it does not use my computer CPU, which is super important to me as well, because you're going to be recording. Can you test out a software download? It's not software, it's hardware. You have to buy the unit. So no, it's not a plug-in. It's an actual standalone floor unit. Okay, I have it here down in front. It's not that big. It's good size. You live in an old house. I could crank my 1x12 and play it on a tiny computer. That's pretty funny. Yeah, you can crank stuff, but it's hard to record that. Are there any effects in the FM3 you like the most? I think the delays and the reverbs, the most important effects to me sound really great. Reverb. I think the reverbs are really nice. And one that nobody seems to get right that I really, really love is the Univibe. Right? I had a line 6 stuff in the Univibe. That was always the one that was never quite right. I think they really nailed the Univibe on this. You know, the fuzzes sound good. Okay, there's one thing. The fuzzes to me don't react as well like a real germanium fuzz when you roll back the volume. There's things like that they don't do 100%. I don't know if they can or can't do it because that's a germanium circuit, blah, blah, blah. So there are, those are the things. But so what would I do in that situation? If I wanted to get a real kind of Hendrixy fuzz thing, then I would plug my fuzz face into the fractal if I needed to do that. Or, I would just use my Marshall in the aux, which, like I said, is a great unit. Oh yeah, and one thing. Oh yeah, it's a good point. Two things. Have you tried running FM3 delays and reverbs in parallel versus series? I have, and I've only really learned that from other people's patches. So what does that mean for anybody who doesn't know what that means? Let me find a patch that does that. Now you see I've got everything in a straight line here. Like I'm simple in this sense. I'm like, okay, I play guitar. This is how I'd run it in the real world. So if we want to get to something, let me see. I can get. Nope. I know I got to find something that does that. I'm sure Austin Buddy's going, this patch does it. Let's see, crystal reverb. No, come on. There we go. Okay. So this is what I love. Watch. Like, these are fun. So what happens here is that, they're running in parallel like an effects loop. So they're not, you have your clean signal and then you're mixing in the pitch here. So it's another way of running stuff. So that's really cool. Oh, this is the stuff that I totally have been finding out that I love. Check this out. So this is fun. Check it out. It's dropping the pitch down to make it a baritone guitar. I don't own a baritone guitar. In a recording. So this is where the stuff comes in. Really, really invaluable things that I can do. It's got synth patches and all that too. So it's really pretty cool. All right, sorry, I'm going to get back. I have too many screens open here. All right. Let's see what else we got here. Oh yeah, we still got that going. Another question, this is from Ricardo. Do you spend a lot of time to set the fractal, or is it an easy action? Okay, if you have an hour time to play guitar, would it be a shame to spend it on a PC? Well, look, this is what I was saying a little earlier, and that's a really great question. Yes, when I first got it, I started going down the deep rabbit hole of going, and I'm like, man, I'm just not practicing. I'm just playing this stupid thing all the time, you know? So yeah, I've done that. But now I just kind of got relaxed and found a few patches that I really like. And what I like about a lot of these units is they try to make it simple, that you can just find the basic amp that you like and dial it in. So I'm at a point now where I can just build an amp or even just pulled up one of their presets and it sounds pretty good. So yes, I did go down the rabbit hole of what you could do with it because it's fun. And now I'm at the point where there's still a million things I know I can do with it, but I just don't even bother because it's not serving my purpose to do that. You know what I mean? Like I know I can do all these things that I'm not doing, but I'm not playing with it live. And at home I'm using a few sounds. I've got this editor and I can just do it nice and easily. You can do this all this stuff from the face of the unit as well, too. I don't know how to do any of that stuff. Okay. Right, so the lime and limpid green. Yeah, I had done a little bit of a Pink Floyd fun thing of Astronomy Domini the other day. And if I look back, well, here's a Brian May patch. Loud tune. Yeah, it's fun, right? Okay. So, for instance, right, so this is what I loved is, let me get to my patch here. You can't see my patch, I gotta go to this other setting. All right, one-man show. Okay. So Astronomy Domini, you know, the Pink Floyd tune, had, you know, they didn't have effects loops. So it's clearly like a delay pedal in the front of your amp. So I went, boop, move delay in the front, and then kind of tried to get the temper right. So I don't know what somewhere near. Right? Yeah, that Benson Echo record. Yeah. Ah, shoot. Yeah. Right, so. So what's fun about that, as opposed to doing it at home with my pedals going, I gotta unplug everything and put this there. I can move things around anywhere I want, like that. So it becomes a lot of fun. And that was easy, you know? Voivod did do a cover of Astronomy Domini. They also did a cover of the Nile song. So, I will, this is somebody asking about my presets. I will do that soon, too. I will do that. I got to get around to doing that. A number of people asked me for it, and I think it'd be fun to share some of the presets. So, you know, what I just did there by moving the effect to the front and the back, you can do that with any of them, really. You can do that with the Line 6 just as easily as this. You can do that with S-Gear. You can do it with any, but it's pre-post delay, and they all do that. The other thing that S-Gear is, I know Michael Scuffham, super nice guy. He designed the Marshall JMP1, so just to let you know. It's more like an amp, and if you want to use pedals, there are no pedals really in it, so to speak of. There's some delay and reverb, which are nice, but it doesn't have univibes and choruses and all that stuff. That's where the Line 6 or the fractal stuff comes in. So, all right. Are there any apps available for iPhones? Oh yeah, just check that out. Yeah, there's plenty of them. I think Bias makes some stuff for your iPhone. There's a lot of great ones too. Well, it's funny. but this is Graham Watson going, working away, trying to learn how to draw MIDI and control. Yeah, MIDI just totally flips me out. And what I like about this stuff and the Line 6 things is it's all internal. I don't have to deal with MIDI. All right, well, hopefully this has been helpful and fun. It's always kind of the gear nerd talking, which is a ton of fun. But like I said, as I will always state on the top of the show, what I like about these units is they're really easy to use. To some extent, depends how deep you want to get. They provide me with all the sounds I need as a professional guitar player. Right? Somebody wants me to do something. I don't own every amp in the world. I don't have the luxury of owning every effect or all these some of the things like that. So I can record things using some of these new digital modelers, which are at such a high level at this point. That's really impressive. They feel good now. And that was always the biggest thing in the past. They just didn't feel good and they weren't inspiring to play. I find this unit inspiring to play. Is it as inspiring as standing in front of my super lead at full volume? No, but it's a different experience. What it is more akin to is if I'm in a recording studio and my super lead is in the other room and I'm listening through monitors of a mic'd guitar. So if I'm recording guitars, I do not have the ability to do that. I don't have a studio, I don't got great mics, I don't have great preamps, and I can't turn anything up to a reasonable volume. So for me, and most of the things you're listening to now, guys, not most, but many, many things are not real guitars. It's really all in the box. So like, especially more modern bands like Periphery, no, right? Yeah, that's the name. Yeah, and Polyphonia or whatever those things are. All those really heavy bands, those aren't really amps for the most part. They're all plugins. So, especially if you're talking about new metal stuff, people are recording all this stuff at home. Nobody can afford studios, big studios, so they're usually recording stuff at home and they're using plugins. So they're pretty ubiquitous at this point. So I think that that's something to think about too. Like I said, what I really like about where they've gotten now is I can get a cool bluesy vintage guitar sound out of them, which I thought in the past was one of the more difficult things to get. Feels kind of like a real amp does through a mic'd situation. Does it feel like a real amp when I'm playing in front of my real amp at volume? No, that's a different thing. So that's the thing that people get confused on. Like, oh man, it doesn't sound like my real amp. It might sound like your amp mic'd in a studio. That is the thing to remember. And I didn't think about that for a really long time. Now, people use them live. They design everything. Like my friend Austin Buddy Gill has his live patch. He calls it live because it's designed to be played through a speaker. So that's really been cool too. I've not had the opportunity to do that. And like I said, for me, this isn't what the unit is for those kind of gigs. Like I said, my friend Angus Clark was in earlier. He plays with Cher. He's playing on stage with Cher. Great guitar sound, killing it. Not an amp to be seen because he's playing through a fractal because it sounds really good, and that's the way those gigs run these days. If you're playing with Lady Gaga or you're playing with Madonna, any of these gigs, nobody's got amps anymore. They're all those kind of touring shows. It's all amp simulators and Metallica. So Dream Theater as well. Like he says he uses the amps. I don't know. Most people, a lot of times the amps are just on stage and everybody's using this stuff. Or they say, well, the amps are on stage and I'm running to the front of the house through the fractal. Really? All right. All right, everyone. I appreciate it. Good hanging again, everyone. And everybody's still here for quite some time. Hopefully this has helped you clear up some of the ideas or what what digital modeling is about, what it can do. It's a tool in your toolbox. That's just the way I look at it. Certain gigs, it's the right tool. Certain gigs and certain situations, it's not. So any and every guitar player I know uses them. Do they use them live? Maybe not. But they use them at home. I guarantee that, for sure. No question. All right, guys. Thanks so much for being here, as always. I will see you next week. And there's some vacation coming up at some point in time. Hope everybody's doing well. Everybody stay safe. And like I said, I always really appreciate you being here. Thanks for the thumbs up. Thanks for the top chats. Thanks for everybody who hits the tip jar and all that. I'll see you guys soon. Thanks, Phil. Thanks again to Phil Mingen, as always.